User-defined functions in DAX are here eventually, and this will change the way we will code DAX in the future. I will show you how they work. Let's imagine we have different distances in kilometer and we want to convert them to miles. In this case, we have to just multiply it by around 0.621, and like this we can easily convert from kilometer to miles. But probably we have to do this multiple times in the same file. Maybe we have to do this in different measures, and every time we have to remember the exact formula to calculate and convert from kilometers into miles. With the new user-defined functions, we can make our life a lot easier. We can create the function once to calculate from kilometers into miles, save it once in a central place in our semantic model, and from then on we can just call the function kilometer to miles. The calculation kilometer to miles doesn't change at all, so in this case it will always be the same calculation. But let's imagine we have something more complex that could also change over time. If you're using a user-defined function, you save it in one central place, and if you want to change the logic, you do it at one spot. You don't have to keep track where exactly you use this calculation, and you don't have to keep track where you have to change it. This makes it a lot easier to maintain a certain logic and reuse it during your whole file. User-defined functions can become a lot more complex, as they can also return tables or expressions and not only simple scalar values. Let's take a look at another example, and let's imagine we have a certain table that we have to calculate again and again. In our case, we will have our sales table and we want to filter it to the brand Contoso and to the customer country Germany. With the calculate table function, we will filter down our table and then we will count the rows over these tables to get the specific sales. In another measure, we want to use kind of the same logic, but in this time we want to filter to the country United States. Another time we probably want to filter to another brand. The important thing is the logic stays more or less the same, but we always need multiple lines of code and we always have the same logic. That's a perfect case for a user-defined function. This logic we can save once as a function, and we can call it at specific occasions during our DAX logic. For example, could I use now the function getSalesTable with the parameters Contoso in Germany, and we get exactly the same table with a single command. We can now do a count rows over this function, and we will get exactly the same result as we had before. If I need the same logic for another country or another brand, I can still use the same function and just change the parameters. Like this, I can also maintain the code at one specific point within our function, and I can reuse it during our whole file. Like this, I can maintain the function within our semantic model once and reuse it whenever I need it with the parameters that I need in a specific case. Let's start with an easy example. We have here an example file where we have our weight and we can filter according to our products if we want the weight in pounds, ounces or in grams. At the moment we just want to calculate from pounds to kilograms, for example, and we will do this with our user-defined functions. At the moment the whole thing here is still in preview. This means the dialog might change at the time you watch the video, but I will show you how it looks now with the first preview. At the moment you can see the functions in the model view or in the DAX query view or of course in the Timdal view. If you go to any of these views, you have to change to the model view, and you might realize that you have here a new point called functions. At the moment we don't see any functions as we didn't create any yet. And now the question is, how can we do that? At this point in time we can only create them in the DAX query view as well as in the Timdal view. I create them now in the DAX query view, and I will try to create a function that will convert our pounds to kilograms. For this I start the function with a define statement, as we do this so far with variables. We can now say we want to define a function. We give the function a name. In our case I will just call it pound to kilogram. Then we have to add a parameter. The parameter has to exist, but it could also be empty. In our case I want to get the weight in pound, and at the end we have to define our function, and this is actually what we want to return. In our case we want to return our weight times now this I have to copy, it is times 0.453 and so on. So that's the calculation from pound into kilogram. And if I would say now update the model with the changes, it would already write back the function. Here we can tweak a few things. So first of all, we want to have better way of writing it. So it seems like the new standard seems to be you do the first bracket in the first row, then you put all of your parameters, then you have this little equal sign and the larger sign, and at the end you use the formula that you will return. As mentioned, this can be any DAX statement that you want. So at the moment it's a very easy calculation, but we can do more complex stuff and we will do so later. Now in this case, I just can say update our model with these changes, and now the function is written back into our semantic model. We can see it here on the side. We have now one existing function. If we open that, we see here pound to kilogram. Don't get scared at the moment with different warnings and also with different syntax highlighting. In this case, okay, weight seems to be a reserved word. So let's call it weight in pound. Let's paste that here. Let's update that in the model. But in general, this is still a little bit buggy. I tried it and there might be sometimes wrong red lines that are actually correct, but it will get better over time. So we updated now our function. It's pound to kilogram. Now let's see how we can use it. Let's go back to the report view and we will create a new measure in our fact table and we will call it weight in kilogram. And the only thing we have to do now is we have to call our function. In our case, it's pound to kilogram. And you see, you can use this function now as any other DAX function. It just exists here in the syntax highlight. Now I want to add our measure some weight and automatically it's calculating our weight from pounds into kilogram. Let's add the measure. If I add it to this table, you can successfully see that our 47 pounds are now 21 kilogram. At the moment, it doesn't fit for ounces and grams. So actually we would have to add in our function something to check for different weights, or we could do a more complex function that is calculating all kind of weights into pounds. We will skip that for the moment. I want to show you something else because I want to add a few more details about these functions. So at the moment we didn't add any more information about our parameter, but we could do this in general. So we have two different ways we could change our parameters. The first ones are just value types. This means it's just from a different type of value. For example, we could say this must be a numeric value. Numeric means it could be a decimal number, it could be a whole number, anything that is numeric. Like this, we could specify, for example, that it cannot accept strings. We can also be more specific. We can say what kind of type it has to be, not only numeric. We could also say it must be an integer, or for example, it must be a decimal. And then only the parameters are accepted according to the specified type. We can of course update, let's not do it with these, let's do it with numeric. We could of course update our function and it would work like this. Next to our value types that we also have expression types. Expression types will be evaluated at a later point. If you want to know more about, or if I should explain the difference between the expression types and value types, just drop it in the comments. I could do another video about that. But for the moment, that's how we would use an easy function. I prepared another example. Let's say we have our customers in different regions. We use here our standard AdventureWorks table. So let's take a look at our customer table. And we see here we have a lot of information about different customers. And what I want to use now is our yearly income column. So we have different incomes starting from $10,000 up to 10 million. So the difference is quite big. And we want to group now into different places. Let's call it a little stupid. So we will create a measure for our first 20,000 and we would have to filter our table. Again, this is not best practice what I do now. I just want to show how the functions work. So let's say the number of customers with 20k salary, and then let's create a variable called filtered table, and here would we would do a calculate table over our dim customers, and we would filter to the ones with a yearly income smaller or equal to $20,000. Then we would have our result, and our result is an easy count rows over our filtered table. And this is what we're going to return. All right, so far nothing very fancy. We take our customer table, filter to all the customers that have a yearly income of $20,000 and below, and then we count the amount of customers in this specific table. So if we want to show that, we can just add it here to our table, and we see now it's filtered to specific countries where we have customers that earn less or equal to $20,000. If we want to do different analysis, we probably have to create this measure multiple times. Let's create it again for 40,000 and also add it to our table. Let's quickly mark that, select that, and we have it here, and probably want to add the same for 60,000. As you can already see, the logic is actually everywhere the same. We take the same measure and we do the same over and over again with different results. The only difference is we really filter for different values. So whenever something is repetitive now, we could use a function that is actually replacing all of the repetitive tasks, and we have a central point where we can use this kind of measurements. Function can not only return a value, a function can, for example, also return a whole table. So let's copy that whole statement and let's try to create a new function. Let's go back to our DAX query view. We do a new query. We define again a new function. This time we call it filtered customer table, and let's open the brackets, and now we want to filter by income. In this case, we know it will be an integer value, so we can define that already. Now we want to return the measure that we just created. So we don't really need the customers. We could actually return the whole measure, including count rows. But in our case, I actually just want to really return the table. So I want to return the table that we calculate here. The only change I have to do, I have to replace, of course, the 60,000 that are fixed here with our income variable and with our parameter. And in this case, it's using the exactly same logic. It's taking our dim customer table and it's filtering to customers with a yearly income smaller or equal to the income that we use from a parameter. Now I will update again our model. Now we can take a look, and we see here on the side already that we have now two functions. One is our pound to kilogram, and the second one is our filtered customer table. So how can we use that now? I mean, we have already our functions, and actually we don't need all of that now because all of this is replaced by our function. The only thing, we want to count the rows of this table. So we can now say we want to count the rows of our filtered customer table with an income of 20,000. And now that's what I meant. You probably see that the parameter is not the correct type, should be in my opinion. And when I click on OK, it also works as expected. Let's copy that whole thing here and just change the value. So we could use it also for the 40,000. And you see now the amount of lines that we can just replace with one single function. Probably also to make it a little bit more readable, we would do it like this in real life. And let's do it last time for our 60,000. And you should see that the measures look exactly the same, at least the results looks exactly the same. And we only had to add one line of code. The main advantage is not only that we only have to use or add one line of code. The real advantage is that we have a central point where we can maintain the function. So if we have to apply another logic, let's say we have to filter for something else, let's go back to our table and we actually realize that we have not only persons, we have also companies as customer type, and we want to filter this down to persons. We could just go to our function because we want to only work with real people. So this means I can now just go to our function and can filter our customer type to person. I update it once in this function, and actually all of my measures are adapted as well. This improves a lot the maintainability. And actually, I hope you get an idea what I mean with it will change the way we will write DAX code. You can also nest different functions. So this means I can use a custom function, a user-defined function, and this can contain another function. So we can be quite modular with the way we are creating our functions and with the way we will write DAX in the future. All right, I hope I gave you a good introduction to user-defined functions. If you want to see more videos or more details, write down in the comments what you want to see. Otherwise, I would be happy if you could drop a like or share the video with people you think that benefit from it, and hope to see you again soon.